Okay everyone, it's time to update this video. There's some new features in Maya, and there's also some features that are kind of replaced and harder to find and in different places. So I want to make sure that I have a new updated version of this video for everyone so people don't get confused as much. Alright, so we're making the heart throne, and literally you can just Google, search Google for heart throne, and then it's like the first one. This is the reference. There's other references up here as well, but this is the one we're making, so I will be pulling this up to show you from time to time, to show you what I am pointing at. Okay, so I'm going to move it off to the side for now, though. So a couple things. First thing, when you do, everything you do, you should always start by going to the project window, and in the project window, you want to click New, and you want to type in heart throne, and pick a folder. Pick a folder that makes sense, to store your Maya projects. So it's going to create this folder inside of this folder, and hit accept, and then that will put you into that project. So now if I do file, save scene as, it's going to pull up right into the scenes folder of that project. Again, I have a whole video on creating and setting projects. Please watch that for a more thorough explanation of this, but I can just start out by saving my scene just to make sure I've got it ready, and I can just hit Control S from now on. And we're just gonna blast through this. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna make the back of the chair, the heart-shaped back of the chair. So we're gonna go through that, starting with that. Now again, everything I do, I do box modeling. So everything I do starts as a cube. And by the way, let me just show you the shelves. Shelves are up here. If you, it's taking a second to load my shelves though. Some of the shelves, there it goes. Sometimes you have to click a couple times. But anyway, so these are the polygon primitives. If you need, and then there's some of the modeling operations here. I don't use the shelves. That's why I usually have them hidden. So I use marking menus, and that's what I'm going to walk you through, is using marking menus. I will leave these visible for a minute though, because I do want to show you where a couple of the buttons are. So, but for now, let's drop a cube in. So I'm going to, again, polycube up here. I use the marking menus because they're better and faster and cooler. So shift right click polycube to drop a cube in. And I can just go in here and adjust this cube. Now I'm going to pull it up a little bit. I'm going to leave it on, I'm going to make sure that it's zeroed out on the X for sure. Zeroing it out on the X is the critical aspect, because we want to model it on the center of the grid. But I'm going to scoot it up a little though, because I want it to be above the floor. If you look at the reference, the heart shape, it's a little above the floor, obviously. And if I'm using the grid to be my floor basically, then I want it to float above the floor a little bit. So anyways, I'm going to also rotate my camera, switch to my scale tool, and squeeze it down a bit to roughly approximate whatever I think the thickness of this back of the chair is. So now that I have approximated that, I can start to do stuff with this. So over here in the channel box on the far right, channel box layer editor, there's the attribute editor as well, which I always tear off, but just so you know. So the attribute editor is here, but the channel box layer editor is here. They're going to usually be docked over here on the right. I tear off my attribute editor because I use it a lot, and a lot of times I just leave it open. But channel box is here. Attribute editor is Control A. I forget what the hotkey for that is, but anyways, channel box. We want the channel box in the inputs. If you don't see these numbers here, click on the word polycube 1. And then what you want to do is actually change subdivisions width to 2 and hit enter. And what that did is it cut this cube in half. Again, box modeling, the idea of box modeling is that everything, like 98% of what you make, starts as a cube. And then you just think of the cube as like a block of clay that you're carving into, and you can actually make anything out of a cube with a lot of hard work and patience. So anyways, so we took a cube and we cut it in half with the subdivisions width. Now, by the way, I cut it in half this way. Keep in mind, you want to look at this. See the little widget down here, the bottom left corner? If the z-axis is facing you, if it is pointing towards you, like if you rotate the camera, if you have the z-axis pointing towards you, that means you are modeling towards the front of the model. So that means this is the front of the chair. I just want to make that clear, because if I say, oh yeah, extrude on the x-axis, well, if you're facing this way, if you're modeling it from this direction, when I say x, you actually would want the z. So all I'm saying is, as long as you have the same orientation that I have when you're modeling, then when I say, oh yeah, extrude on the x, then that will still be true. But if you're modeling it from this direction, I say extrude on the x, and then you actually extrude on the z, or if you extrude on the x when I say to extrude on the x and it goes the wrong way, it's because you're modeling from the wrong axes. Not that it's the wrong axes, you can model from whatever axes you want. I'm just telling you that it's easier to follow the instructions if you are aimed at the same direction I am. Okay, so we use subdivisions width to basically cut this exactly in half. There's other ways to do that, but I like to show a few of the different ways as we go. So subdivisions width 2. Now I'm going to hold down the right click. Again, always, if I say right click in Maya, I mean hold down the right click. Tapping the right click doesn't do anything. Holding down the right click gives you marking menus. So face mode is down. And again, one of the reasons that marking menus are so awesome is because once you know which direction a particular thing is, like I know edge mode is up. I don't even have to look. I can just flick it. I can flick it to the up and to the right for object mode. I can flick it to the left for vertex mode, down for face mode. I literally don't even have to look at the menu. I can just right click and flick it, and it will go to that thing in that direction. So just one of the reasons I like to preach the marking menus, because they're so awesome. So that's more of me preaching the marking menus. Okay, anyways, but face mode, and then I'm going to select the left half, and again, always double check your selection. Rotate around the camera so that you can double check. And then when you're sure that you've only got half of the cube selected, hit the delete key. Now you may notice that my cube has some thickness on the border edges here. Right where the hole is, the hole in the cube, there are thicker edges. Those are called border edges, and I have intentionally caused those to be thicker. And I will show you how to do that first of all. So go to it doesn't really matter. I'm just going back to object mode right now. But if you go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, and you go to over here, you look at how many preferences there are. There's so many preferences. It's just overwhelming. But what we want is here. So in the polygons menu of the preferences, you want to check on this highlight border edges. And you want to make, and I've turned it up to 3 because I want to get it just a little bit thicker. I want to make it really noticeable when the edge is a border edge. And I'll tell you why. Because it's really fucking useful to know that, oh crap, there's a hole in my model. I'm just saying. And you'll see later on in this demo, it'll be very clear to you why that's important. So anyways, so highlight border edges, edge width of 3. When you hit save, that will turn that on, but you'll notice that you won't have this model, it won't be highlighted yet for you. And the reason is because that turns on the preference from now on. What that means is newly created models will by default have that turned on, but the model that you already created needs to be turned on as well because it was already implemented. So if you go to the attribute editor, again, that was Control A, or it's this button up here. If you go to the attribute editor with that object selected in object mode, you go to this one right here, the second one down, Mesh Component Display. And again, I'm in P Cube Shape 1, this tab. There's a bunch of tabs. There's less tabs if you delete history, just so you know. If you've got so many tabs you can't find P Cube Shape 1, just delete history. It'll wipe out a bunch of these and you'll be left with just a few. But P Cube Shape 1, right here. It's right here in Mesh Component Display, Display Borders, Border Width 3. So same options basically, but you can do this on a per object level if you choose to. Maybe you want border edges showing on some objects but not others. I don't know, but that is available for you there. So turn that on, and then it should show up now for this model. Okay, so border edge is really important. Good to see. Good to be able to see those. Okay, so we cut the cube in half. And again, we're trying to make a heart shape. Kind of hard to make a heart shape out of a cube at this point, but I do want to show you something really exciting, and it is this. Edit, and you go to Edit, Duplicate Special Options. Again, always if you go to the square next to the word, gives you the options dialog box instead of just doing the thing. And again, I always say this in class over and over and over. Annoy the crap out of my students until they repeat it like zombies. But first thing you should do when you open this window, edit, reset settings, because you see all those numbers that just changed. Maya loves to remember everything you did with this window. So if you don't reset the settings back to their defaults, God only knows what kind of random values are stored in here from last time. Literally, it could be you could have opened Maya 3 months ago and been doing something random. Maybe you hit apply and suddenly 1,000 chickens are in your scene. I don't know, because who knows what you were doing with this last time. So edit, reset settings just to clear it out, just to make sure there's no random negatives or random values in here that you just don't notice. Then what we want to do in this case, we used this before for making snowman scene stuff, but in this case we want to go from copy to instance, and we want to go just number of copies is 1, but scale -1 in the X. Again, remember these are X, Y, and Z. So scale -1 in the X, and again, X for me is this way. That's the way, the direction we want to mirror this. And you hit apply. Scale -1, what that does is it actually flips the model inside out. I also want to turn on my wireframe on shaded. I have a hotkey for that, but I just want to show you where the button is. I want to turn on wireframe on shaded because I do want to see the wireframe on both sides at all times so that I can see what's happening with the wireframe. So just so you know, I like wireframe on shaded. I also have a hotkey for X-ray mode, which I use constantly. I have a hotkey for X-ray mode that I've custom created. That is here, this button here, if you want to turn on X-ray mode. You will see me toggle in and out of X-ray mode constantly. That's why I created a hotkey, because it's really freaking useful, and you'll understand more why later. So anyway, scale -1. Now you could scale -1 in any axes. It just depends on which axes you're trying to mirror on. In this case, we want to mirror on the X because that's the direction across which we are cutting this in half and trying to cut this heart shape in half. And that way you only have to model half of it. But let me also show you too what changing from copy to instance is super exciting, because watch, here's what you can do. I can go into right click and go to vertex mode, and I can marquee select these points, switch to my move tool, pull these up, and you see I only selected this half, but everything I do to this half now happens to this half as well. And just so you know the technical aspect of it, it's because they're sharing the same shape node. These two objects now share the same shape node, although this one, because of the scale -1, this one is inverted. So everything I do to this happens to this, but it just inverts it like a mirror image, which is really useful when you're modeling, because then you only have to model half and it flips it over to the other side. Again, obviously it's only really useful if the shape you are making is symmetrical. If it's not symmetrical, then that's not very useful and you can't use it, but just saying. All right, so we've got this kind of started, but we can't make this heart shape yet. We can kind of start it, sort of, but we can't make a heart shape. Let me close this, get it out of the way. We can't make a heart shape yet until we cut more edges. We need more edges. Right now, we don't have enough edges to make this shape. And in fact, you know what? Let me just give you this. I want you to be able to see this as I work on it, so that you see what I see when I'm looking at my reference. So we can't make this heart shape yet until, there we go, make it a little bigger, until we actually cut more edges. So how do we cut edges? Well, just so you know, for you button people, there is this button right here. It's the multi-cut tool. Now, this is one of the reasons I'm redoing this video, by the way. The multi-cut tool, which if you get to it like I get to it, is shift right click, multi-cut to the left. And you'll notice, maybe you'll notice if you've watched my other video, this is where the split polygon tool used to be. And the thing is, the multi-cut tool replaces multiple tools. It's a really fucking amazing tool. It's super exciting. When I started watching the videos about what's new in Maya, and I saw the demos of this tool. It just blew my mind, and I said, oh my God, that's the best tool ever, and I will use this from now on. So multi-cut tool replaces the split polygon tool and the insert edge loop tool and the slice tool. Let me show you why. Let me show you what it does, because it's amazing. Ready? So check this out. Now, if I click off the model and drag, I can slice right through the model. That's pretty cool, but don't use it, because that's messy and it's not a good idea. You might use it someday for some particular reason, I don't know. But all I can tell you right now is that is probably dangerous. It's cool, but don't use it. Okay, so that's just clicking and dragging off the model. Now you can also, this is what the split polygon tool used to do. Click, 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 click. I can click and create points like that. If you hit enter, it puts those points in, but I'm going to do that. I can click from point to point, to cut faces if I want. I can undo that, and then I can click from an edge to an edge, but don't do that also. Okay, I'm showing you things you can do, but that doesn't mean you should do it. Now, you may at some point use that, but as a beginner, you should never use this process because it adds n-gons. N-gons are bad. You do not want n-gons. What's an n-gon? If you haven't gotten this figured out by now from other videos, that's a triangle. Triangles are not great, but some programs hate them. Other programs are okay with them. But triangles are not the worst thing in the world, but they're not good necessarily. This is an n-gon. It is a face that has more than 4 edges. This is, let me see. This is a quad. A 4-sided face, if it is a face that has 4 sides, that is a quad. That is good. That's what you want. You want 4-sided faces. This is an n-gon, and now this is an n-gon, this is an n-gon. There are too many edges for these faces. If you have more than 4 edges, it's too many, and it's bad, and it will break shit. I'm telling you right now, could cause your game engine to burst into flames. It could, who knows? At the very least, you're going to export this to some other program or to a game engine. At the very least, the program is going to yell at you and say, hey, jackass, your model sucks. Please fix it. So I'm just saying, n-gons are bad. Avoid them at all costs. And the quickest way to get n-gons is if you start playing with the multi-cut tool to do stuff like this, and you start cutting crazy shapes. Now that's not to say that you shouldn't ever do that, but if you do that, you have to go back in and cut those shapes to create quads. You need to then dissect it into quads to clean it up. You have to clean it up if you're going to do that. Now, that being said, what should you use this tool for? Holding the control key down switches to insert edge loop mode. So the insert edge loop tool that I used to talk about, like, oh yeah, insert edge loop tool, that's the best tool ever. Well, now multi-cut tool is the best tool ever because it has the insert edge loop tool built into it. You just hold the control key down and it drops edge loops. So if I want to make this heart shape, I can hold the control key down, click, and drop an edge loop. But immediately, as soon as I drop one edge loop, switch off of the edge loop, the multi-cut tool. So I switched back to the move tool, and I'm going to go to vertex mode. As soon as you drop an edge loop, start to move the points around. Don't just start dropping edges willy-nilly for no reason, or not for no reason. I'm saying just don't drop edges willy-nilly, assuming that you're going to go back to those edges to move them around. As soon as you drop an edge, start using it, because I'll tell you right now, you will get a giant headache. If you just say, oh, I know I'm going to need these edges, so I'll just drop them in right now. If you do that, I guarantee you are definitely guaranteeing yourself a headache, because you got to use all those points. You got to go back to all those points and nudge them around. It's much, much, much better. I'm going to do much better to drop an edge loop and then immediately use those points to start roughing in the shape. Always rough in and then refine. Rough in and then refine. If you start to just drop edge loops and you don't use them right away, you're just guaranteeing yourself a headache. Now, looking at my reference, I can tell that my heart shape is actually it needs to be elongated. So I can actually grab all the points if I want. Just marquee select the entire group of points and just stretch it a little taller. Try to get this the proportions a little closer. Although this is a little too steep of an angle for that, so I will kind of slow that down a bit, and then pull this out a little more like this, pull these out like that, and basically just this is what it comes down to the artwork. Now I've roughed in the shape, and now to make good art, to make this prettier, it just comes down to cutting more edges, moving points around, moving points around, moving points around. I like to say you should be pushing points around until your eyes bleed. If you have nightmares about vertices and polygons and edges, then you're probably on the right track. If you don't have nightmares about this, then you probably aren't working hard enough. To get good at this, it requires hours and hours and hours, non-stop hours and hours and hours of practice. If you don't do that, you're going to end up being mediocre at best. So I'm just saying, you got to put the time in. You got to put the time in to get good. If you don't put the time in, you may wind up as mediocre at best, if not completely sucky. Just saying. Okay, so anyways, pushing points around, trying to create that shape. Again, keep an eye on your reference. Really look at your reference. If you look here, this flare, kind of bends in a little bit before it flares out. So that's what I've done here, is I've kind of pushed these points in just a little bit so that it kind of comes in and then flares out. Now, to make this more round, if you need it to be more round, you just got to cut more edges. Multi-cut, drop an edge loop, switch to the move tool, grab some points. By the way, what I'm doing, notice that I'm marquee selecting those points. It's because this has thickness. Don't forget, if you click, you're just getting the front and you're going to break it. So make sure you marquee select. Rotate the camera so you get a good view of it. Marquee select. And then, now could I do this in edge mode? Sure. I could go into edge mode and grab this edge, because that edge obviously is those 2 points that I've been grabbing, right? Now I could grab that edge and move it around and use the edge mode to do this. Sure. Do whatever you like. All I'm saying is the reason I didn't use the edge is because that edge is kind of small and it makes it a little harder to grab. If I'm in vertex mode, I can literally just go whip that little selection across it, and it's really fast to grab those points. So a lot of getting fast and good at this is just being smart about how you make selections. Make selections faster, make them cleaner. So just saying. Okay, so we basically busted out a heart shape pretty fast, right? Now this, again, is pretty blocky. It could be a little bit smoother. But at the same time, there's the balancing act, right? There's a balancing act that, hey, we're game artists. Film artists can do whatever the hell they want. They can just cut away at this and make it super smooth and pretty. But, I'm sorry to say, you're a game artist, and game artists have to worry about poly counts, and you got to be a lot more efficient and careful. So I'll cut maybe one more edge loop this way, and just to get that one last little blocky piece, a little less blocky. Now, I'm going to leave it here. I don't want to get too carried away. I'll just say this is probably good enough for now. And let's call this a day on this one. But we want to leave the big heart shape separate. And that will become more clear on why we're doing that when we get to UV mapping, because we're going to UV map this later on. So leave the big heart shape separate. However, we need a second heart shape, right? We need the little one. So let's get to that. How about we grab both of these in object mode again. Again, object mode is up and to the right. So in object mode, grab both of these and hit Control D to duplicate. Scoot them up, scale them down, scoot them up some more. Just kind of basically fiddle with this until it feels like the proportions are just right. But now, if you look closely at the reference, this heart shape is actually a little bit more bulbous in a couple of ways. So let's massage the shape a little bit to get it a little more true to the reference. So if I go back here and I start to pull these points around, I can nudge these points and try to mimic that shape a little bit more closely. This one does have a little bit steeper of an angle here to kind of get that going. And that's a little bit closer. It's a little bit closer to what this is. Now, of course, this also has these little frilly things here, but we're not going to worry about those. Those are going to be extra kind of bonus stuff if you want to fiddle with trying to create those later. But for now, let's just say that this is good enough, at least in this this direction. The silhouette right here looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. But if you look at it from this angle, it's super flat from this angle as well. And if you look at the lighting information here on the little heart here, you can see it's implying that there's shadows that are implying that this is more of a round shape in that direction as well. So in order to do that, to achieve that, what we're going to do first is we're going to grab both of these small heart shape pieces in object mode, and we are going to shift right click, combine. That combines them into one piece. But again, here is why we turned on the border edges. We turned on border edges because we want to see, oh look, those edges right here down the middle, again, X-ray mode. So I have my X-ray mode hotkey, but in X-ray mode, look at that. These edges are still thick. Those are still border edges. What does that mean? It means there's still a hole there. And if I go to vertex mode just to demonstrate, that can be broken. That is not a good, sewn together model. The model is combined, but not sewn together. So we need to sew this together to achieve what we want to achieve. So, and by the way, anytime you have a seam, if you have a seam on a mirrored object like this, one of the best reasons to model on the grid, like we modeled on the 0, 0, 0 on the grid, is that I can do this. If I want to fix it, if I somehow screwed up my seam, I can hold the X key down and snap that point to the grid. That fixes it very easily. So, but now to sew this together, I want to go into edge mode, and I want to marquee select right down the middle, and I want to double check with my X-ray mode so I can see, did I get all the border edges? I want to make sure I have all the border edges selected. Now I could, if I just a little tip, I could, if I really wanted to be careful and clean with my selection, I could marquee select right down the middle, and then control marquee select to deselect those chunks on the sides. If I really wanted to be careful to isolate my selection to just those edges. That's a great thing to do. Making selections, again, faster and better. You build up a little instinct for that, where you start to get faster and better at those things without thinking about it. I just want to make it clear to you that's those are options. Use the add to selection, use the remove from selection, make a large selection, and then control key to deselect certain chunks. That's a very fast way to do things. But just for the purpose of demonstration, though, I'm going to go ahead and leave extra edges selected, just so you could see kind of what's happening when I do this next thing. So now with all those edges selected, I'm going to shift right click, and then shift right click is great because there's really great tools here, but this gets a little tricky when you have these fancy ones. Ready? So when you go shift right click, you go up to merge collapse edges, but then you go up and to the right. So it's like menus within menus. But you go up and to the right to merge border edges and go to the options. Now the reason we go to the options in this case is it defaults to threshold of 0, and that may or may not work. If you hit apply, so sometimes it works, and every time I do this demo, you never know. And it all depends on scene scale and other variables. But yeah, you might hit apply with threshold of 0, and it might work. And it worked, you see, because you could tell because the border edges went away. When the border edges go away, it is now merged up and sewn together. Now, if it doesn't work at threshold of 0, then you just turn this up a little and hit apply. And then turn it up a little and hit apply until they go away. Sometimes you might have it happen where some edges go away, but not all of them. So just keep turning this up until they all go away. And if you but just don't drag it all the way up and then hit apply. Don't do that right away, because I just give you fair warning, you may have your model implode. Your model may implode if you turn it all the way up and hit apply. So just be careful. Turn this up little by little until those edges go away. And and it very well may be the case that you at threshold 0 you hit apply, it might go away, and that's great. If that works, then no big deal. Okay, so this is now a solid piece. This is all now one solid piece, and it's ready to manipulate further in terms of creating the roundedness. So how do we get the roundedness? Well, if we go to face mode, multi-cut tool is like the coolest freaking tool ever, and it is probably one of the most powerful modeling tools I've ever seen. The other most common and powerful modeling tool you'll need probably fairly often is the extrude face. But what I want is I want to select the entire front panel here of this heart shape. Now I could select a piece, select one face, and then Control Shift select, Control Shift select, Control Shift select, Control Shift select, and just go through and select every damn piece. And sometimes if you're in a hurry, you might get like, you might accidentally click and drag. And anyways, the point is that could take a minute. That's not necessarily efficient selection tricks. So check this out. Watch how much faster I can select it if I just go, I'll turn X-ray mode on just to be careful. But if I go to the, like really rotate my camera just so I see a side view, and I marquee select right down, so it like kind of goes down the middle. Now that selected everything except the back, but it also selected the side panels. But watch this. Now if I hold the control key and marquee from the opposite direction, right down the middle again, it deselects those side panels and I'm left with the front panel. Now that is just way smarter because it took like literally 2 clicks. 1 click to add a big chunk of selection, then another click to remove the stuff I didn't want. So there you go. I got exactly the front panel that I want. And now if I shift right click and do extrude face, I can do an extrude face and this little widget pops up. This is new and you could do some stuff with this, but I want to show you something. I'm going to immediately switch. I did the extrude face, but I'm going to immediately switch to the move tool, pull it out, and then I'm going to hit the scale tool and pull it in. So I'm going to do that again. Shift right click, extrude face, pull it out a little, switch to the scale tool and pinch it down. Now you see what I'm doing there? See how that's extruding out, but then I'm tapering it in, extruding out, then tapering it in, and that will start to give you a more rounded sort of front to this. So extrude out, switch the scale tool, and pull it in. So, and then you could just adjust the, by pulling those forward and back and around, and so that's how you would get a little bit more of a bulbous round front shape. So that looks pretty good. We've got the little heart and the big heart. The big heart needs to stay separate again. Just reminding you, keep this one. Don't merge this one. Don't sew it together. This one, yes, merge it, sew it together. And again, that will become clear why we do that later when we do UV mapping. But we're getting somewhere. We've got basically the large heart and the big and the small heart now, and everything is as it should be. Again, I want you to make this exactly as I make it, because when we get to UV mapping, if yours isn't like mine, you're gonna freak out and be like, oh crap, I don't know what to do because my shape is different than his shape and stuff like that. So just make sure you do it exactly like I do it. That's pretty critical for this particular project. Okay, so moving on. The seat of the chair here, really fucking easy. Ready? Polycube, drag it up. Gonna get it into position. Squeeze it down. Move it around. Just keep an eye. It's like kind of cutting off the tip of the heart shape there. Try to like get it right here. And then just basically keep an eye on the proportions where, okay, where does this edge of it here line up to the heart? Maybe just a little bit narrower. And then I'm leaving enough thickness, by the way, here to basically take into account the cushion and the bottom of the chair. Why? Because it's more efficient. I can just carve into the model if I want, to kind of imply some of this. Or, better yet, I can just imply that the change of surface with a texture, because the less polygons I have, the better. So if I imply that with a texture, the only thing we really need to do is kind of give it more shape for the arc of the cushion. So all I got to do, go to the multi-cut tool, control click, go to the move tool, face mode, and just pull this up a little to where that sort of implies an arc there. And that's enough. That's really enough, especially for this particular scenario. Now, if you wanted to get fancy, you could carve into this more. You could cut more, cut the edge loops here, cut an edge loop there, and then you could, basically take this and, by the way, here's a little selection trick. Select this, Control Shift, double click this, and see how it selects all the faces all the way around. So you select the first face, then you Control Shift, double click the next face, and it selects all the faces around. Now I could just do, with that selection, I could easily do an extrude face, and then use the blue arrow to kind of push in, and there you go. Now you've implied like the separation there between the cushion and the seat. So that's something you could do if you feel inclined. But everything you do like that, every little cut you make like that, the more complex the object, the tougher it's going to be to UV map. Just FYI, fair warning. Okay, so that's good enough for that. And again, proportions may be off. You know, it's one of those things where you should definitely zoom out every now and then and double check. But I'm not going to concern myself with that right now. Mostly, if you get the shapes right, you can always adjust proportions a little bit later by scaling the pieces and so forth. But now the arms and the legs. The arms and the legs are going to be trickier. They are going to be trickier, and so I hope you're ready for that. Okay, drop a cube. Everything starts as a box, right? Box modeling. Again, there's a different type of modeling called edge modeling. I'm not going to show you that because I don't use it. It's rather awkward. And I do have a friend that uses it, at least one that I know of. I don't know too many people that use that process, but I do know that my friend uses it, and I don't know. I don't get it. Like, I mean, I get it, but I don't really get it. I don't use that technique. It's just weird to me. So feel free to look up edge modeling workflows if you feel like you want to try some other sort of modeling process. But I'm teaching you box modeling. So in my class, you have to do box modeling. And most people I know from the industry, most people I know use box modeling techniques. It just makes more sense when you think of it as a block of clay that you then cut into and mess with. Okay, so here we go. I basically, just so you know, I will zoom in a little more. Just so you know what I'm doing, I am looking at my model, and this little piece right here, just that little piece, that's all I'm looking at right now. Because I want to start with that and then extrude out this kind of piece here. Okay, so I'm going to go to edge mode, pull this out a little bit, maybe pull this in a little bit, because this does taper. So I'm just going to imply that by going, to this edge, and just try to imply that little bit of a taper there. But now I'm going to go to face mode, and I'm going to shift right click extrude, and then this is where it gets fancy and tricky. Ready? Extrude up, pull it over a little, hit the E key to rotate, and then I'm going to do it again. Extrude face, pull it out, pull it over, rotate it, maybe pull it over a little more, extrude face, pull it out, pull it over, rotate it, and this is like, and then in this case, I'm going to pinch it down as well. Now that is nowhere near pretty or nice. It's nowhere near as nice as this, but it gets me some. So basically, I just pulled out a stretch of clay to work with. So this is rough. This is just getting me in the ballpark to then massage the shapes around. Now, a good way to massage the shapes around, if you tap the spacebar, gets you to the 4-panel view, and then I can tap the spacebar down here and get to go to, you have to point the mouse at that viewport. Then you tap spacebar again, it maximizes that viewport. Then I can zoom in here, and basically this is now an orthographic view, which means I now have a silhouette to work with that I can then manipulate. Now, to manipulate the silhouette, don't forget, if I go to vertex mode, don't forget to marquee select when you click these points. If you just left click, you're breaking your model. Don't forget that there's a point behind that point. That surface has thickness. So don't forget to marquee select so you get both points. But now I can just really quickly just get in here and start to massage the shape around to get the silhouette that I need, so that this will be correct. And if I need more edges, which I probably will, if I need more edges to make it cleaner and prettier, I can just drop them in. So now I want to switch. I use the extrude face to pull these out, but now if I shift right click, go to multi-cut, and hold the control key, I can drop more edges this way. So I can drop a couple more edges, switch back to my move tool, go to vertex mode, and just nudge the points around until this becomes a more gentle, more rounded shape that is prettier and closer to the reference. And like I said, to get good at art on this side, it's really attention to detail and spending as much time as you need to make this shape as close to the reference as possible. That is really where the artwork comes in. Because you could just say, okay, that's good enough and move on. And that's fine. In some cases, you just, eventually you have to say that. Eventually you have to say, okay, that's good enough. It reads the way it needs to read. But, the more time you put into moving points around, the prettier the shapes are going to be, and the better your grade. So putting time into it, and cleaning it up as much as you can. Let me pull this one in just a little bit more. It was a little too fat, I think. But I think that's good. I think I'll go with that. And then switch back to my perspective view by tapping spacebar, and now I have the perspective view again. And you see that it's kind of on the right track. It's getting there. But again, to do this exactly like I do it in my lecture on campus, we need to take it a step further, because there's 2 arms, right? Now we could duplicate this with the duplicate special to mirror it across. There's 2 arms, but there's actually 4 legs. So 4 legs, which means that best thing to do, what we can do to really speed up our workflow, we can actually cut this whole thing into quadrants. We can cut it into fourths, which is really cool because that saves us, basically we have to do a quarter of the work that way. So if we shift right click, go to the multi-cut tool, I can just cut this along here somewhere, and then I can go to the face mode, marquee select the entire back, right? Just kind of like what we did with with that first cube we created, and I can hit the delete key. Basically, that's going to cut that in half and leave a hole, leave a seam. Now, the fancy tricks. All right, here's where it gets really fancy. And bear with me and pause and rewind if you need to. But we now have 1/4 of this scenario, right? If you look at this, there's 2 arms, but there's 4 legs. So we cut it into a quarter. But now, if we get really fancy, we can do this. We can go to the Edit Duplicate Special options like we did before. Again, reset settings just in case, because we don't really remember where we put negatives and all that. Change from copy to instance again, because that's what allows the shape to maintain and update itself. So then, in this case, if we want to mirror it this way, remember before we scaled -1 on the X? Well, the X is this way. And yes, we do want to scale in that direction. I mean, we do want to mirror it in that direction, but we also want to mirror it in this direction. So let's mirror it in this direction first. So if I put the scale -1 in the Z this time, now if I hit apply, it mirrors it in that direction. But here's the trick. Look at the gap that it left. To do this properly, let me undo that. To do this properly, you need to move the pivot. The pivot is critical for a lot of modeling things, for modeling operations, especially for animation. But I'm just saying, the pivot point, getting used to manipulating the pivot point is a very, very good trick to be in the habit of doing. So check this out. If I hit the insert key, and by the way, some of you on Macintoshes, get out of my class. I'm just kidding. But if you're on a Macintosh, there's also the D key. The D key also toggles pivot point. I think they did that because of some of those random rare Mac users. So the D key toggles move pivot as well, but this is turned on move pivot mode. Now I can move the pivot to wherever I want it to be. And usually when you're going to move the pivot, there's some new awesome move pivot mode buttons, by the way. I'll show you that in another video, a little kind of secondary video. There's some awesome new features to this in Maya 2016, but we'll come back to that. For now, let me show you the critical part. Holding down the V key, again, check it out. If I hold down the V key, holding down the V key, when I hold down the V key, you notice this snapping magnet lights up. That is snap to points. I can click and I can hold down the V key and click and drag. Make sure you click on the yellow thing, by the way. Click on the yellow little icon there in order to drag it to a point. So you snap that to the seam. So if you snap the pivot point to the seam, now if you hit apply, now it mirrors across the seam. And that's critical. If you want to mirror something across a seam, make sure your pivot point is at the seam. That's what makes that mirroring possible. So we snap that across. Now, if I go back to the move tool, this is now in place and ready to go. And if you see, it is instanced, so I can now adjust the shape on either side of that, which would be great. But we also want this to mirror across the x-axis. So we got to change the pivot point here. The axes here. So we want to put the -1 back on the x-axis. But again, if I hit apply. Okay, well, it mirrored it, and yes, I could just drag this over and try to eyeball it. I could do that, but watch this. This is way better. If I want to make sure that this mirrors exactly across to the exact position on the opposite side, this is all I have to do. If I go to the Insert key, and then I snap the pivot, and in this case, I'm going to hold the X key down, and you see X key lights up the snap to grid magnet. So X key, now I'm going to snap it right to the center of the grid. And again, the center of the grid is the center of the world. My chair is kind of high up. I'll have to move that. But if I snap to the center of the grid, now when I hit apply, it's going to mirror it and flip it and put it exactly on the opposite side of the world, which in this case is the grid, which in this case is the chair. So perfect. Bam. It's done. I can close this. I'm going to grab everything and scoot it down because apparently my chair decided to float really high. I don't know how I got to that point, but and then no big deal. Now I've got most of the chair done. I just need the legs. The legs seem to be a spot where the arm and the legs in general, people tend to have really bad issues creating these. I've noticed when people turn in their assignments, this is where people stumble a lot. And I'll tell you why. Usually because it's the extrude tool. Don't forget, if you use the extrude tool, let me just make the cut. Okay, first of all, multi-cut, control key, bam, drop an edge loop. And then I can go back to face mode and I can extrude this face out. So bam, see that? 4 legs all at once. Pretty exciting. You do a quarter of the work. You only got to make 1 leg and 3 of them get updated all at once. Now again, this is why people screw up the legs so often. The extrude tool is tricky because watch, what if I undo? Okay, I was like, oh, I did a couple undos. Now my extrude is gone, right? But you notice how the manipulator's still there? The extrude manipulator's still there. What that means is if I hit the W key, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll switch to, I'm done, I undid. But check it out, it's still there. There's still a face there because if you undo, you have to undo. You just have to keep undoing. And I would recommend, honestly, just undo all the way back to where that manipulator goes away, and just in case, grab the face and wiggle it. Grab the face and wiggle it just to make sure there's not an extra face there. Because if there's an extra face there, there's going to be faces with inside of faces, and it's going to fuck shit up. You're gonna freak out and be like, and I'm going to tell you, yeah, you might as well just start over because it just becomes a real pain to clean up. So just be really careful with that extrude tool. If you extrude a face, immediately move it, and if you undo, make sure you undo far enough that it gets rid of the manipulator, and you know for a fact that face is gone. And test it if you want by grabbing the face and wiggling it just to make sure there's no face underneath it. Because faces with inside of faces will make things really painful, and you'll have to probably start over. And it will definitely screw up your UV mapping. Even if it looks okay, if there's faces within inside of faces, as soon as you try to UV map, it could crash your computer. If not just making the UV mapping bad. So just so you know. But just to get back to the demo here, extrude out, and then maybe extrude out again, but this time go to the rotate tool, go to the move tool, and then extrude again, pull it out, pull it over. Very similar to what we did with the top of the chair there, with the arm. So this time I'll pull out, maybe I'll scale it up a little, scoot it up a little, then they'll extrude again, give it some thickness there for that. Basically, I'm looking for this little lump here where it kind of turns like that. Kind of do that, and then extrude one more time, pull it out, scale it down to where it tapers so that you get the little ball shape at the end. Now, this, again, it's in the ballpark, but nowhere near clean or pretty enough. This is, again, for a beginner, and if you give me something like this for a beginner, I'll be like, okay, whatever, it's fine. But to get good at this, just put some time into it, go to the front panel, and just get in there and make that silhouette cleaner. Go to edge mode, vertex mode, and then just start nudging points around until the silhouette comes out much cleaner. And that will definitely pay off as far as a much nicer looking model. So that's important. It's important to take pride in this and have fun with it. I think a lot of people in the beginning don't really. If the students that I see kicking ass that do really, really well, they're the ones that are in the computer lab or at home if you're online, whatever. But if you're working on your projects 10 to 12 hours a day, you'll get good fast. Some of you may have full-time jobs. I understand. I get it. It sucks to be an adult. But you got to find the time. If you don't put the time in, you can get good at this. If you don't spend 12 hours a day, that just means it's going to take you like 2 years to get good. Whereas the other guy that spent, 12 hours a day, whatever, that guy's going to get good in like a month. So you got to put the time in at some point. If you do it all at once, it just goes faster. You'll get good faster. But there's no avoiding the fact that you're not going to get good unless you put the time in. It's just a law of nature, I guess. So anyways, but that's pretty good. That mimics that shape fairly well, aside from spacebar. It also kind of twists. If you look closely at the reference, it kind of spins out a little bit, twists out. So to do that, all we got to do is go to vertex mode, marquee select a chunk of vertices, but I'm going to be careful, X-ray mode again. Deselect that one, I didn't want that one. I'm going to Control Shift add that one, and hit the F key to really focus on my camera on that, rotate around, just really double check. Okay, cool, I got the points I want. Now I'm going to hit the E key and just spin it out a little. Turn off X-ray mode for a second. Spin it out a little, pull it forward a little, maybe pull it out a little this way, and then now I'm going to go to X-ray mode again to control deselect that one ring of points. Deselect that ring of points, and then I'll spin it a little further, pull it out a little further, double check, from different angles, make sure the shape is kind of coming the direction I want, and maybe one last time I'll deselect one more ring, and then do it one more time. Just spin it out a little, pull it forward a little, check my shape, and then turn off X-ray mode and double check it from a distance. And that feels pretty good. I feel like it, kind of fairly closely mimics this sort of twist out there. And that's good to go. Now this is the heart throne. This is as far as you need to take it to get a C. If you give me this, I'll give you a C. And again, I will check. I want to make sure that I'll do this. I'll grab your points of the leg here and I'll wiggle it and make sure all 4 points, all 4 legs move, because I want to make sure this is set up exactly the same way, because when we get to UV mapping, I want to see that that this is set up in a way that we can UV map this quadrant and it updates all 4, because UV mapping respects the instancing as well. Okay, anyways, and then this I don't care as much about. I don't care as much about how you do that. That's just a pretty simple shape. If you want to carve in a little extra detail on it, you can. The more detail you carve, the harder it is to unwrap, but it's not the end of the world. All right, anyways, the legs are pretty critical. I want to make sure you did them the same way so that you can unwrap them properly. This needs to be cut in half, like I demonstrated, because again, UV mapping, it's kind of important for that. This needs to be merged, sewn together, again, for my UV mapping demonstration. If you want to add more stuff, again, to get a better grade than a C, you just got to add more. Like I say, more, better, cooler. More, better, cooler could mean you add in those little frilly things up there. To be honest with you, those little frilly things there wouldn't be modeled in a game engine. Those would not be modeled. Those would probably be like a texture on a polygon plane with some alpha. The crown shape here, the crown on top of the heart there, again, in a game engine, not modeled. It's going to be a texture. The cushion, now the cushion, if you want, you could just easily Control D on this sucker, modify center pivot. You could push this down, scale it up, squish it this way, pull it forward. You could put a cushion in there pretty easily. Now that's not good either. I mean, in terms of like what you should do with this is if I go to Control 1 is a new hotkey, by the way. Control 1 will isolate a model. So you can Control 1 toggle isolate select on something. But if I Control 1 on this, if I go into face mode, what you should do to be efficient is marquee select that whole chunk there. And then maybe Control marquee select the panel. Because basically I just want just the back panel. That back panel, if you look, if I hit the delete key, I don't need that back panel on this because look, when I turn off the isolate select, that back panel is buried inside this the frame of the chair there. You don't need those faces. If you don't need the faces, delete them. If you embed an object inside of another object, you shouldn't do that terribly often. There's certain times you should do it, other times you shouldn't. Basically though, if you embed an object inside of another object, at least go in and delete the faces that are buried inside the other faces, because that's just wasting poly count for no reason. So don't do that as often as possible. But okay, so anyways, you could put a cushion there. You could put throw pillows. You can add more to this, but make sure the critical components are in there. Make sure that all the critical components are in there. The ones that I did, do them my way. If you want to add throw pillars, cool. If you want to add those little curly things, cool. A lot of people also, if you look at the reference, a lot of people choose to make the vases and the flowers. I would suggest, again, if you are in my on-campus class, I'm also asking you to export this to Unity and make a web build. So what that means is you need to grab the entire thing, but do a save as before you do this. Do a save as, because I need the my file to have all these things broken out. But so do a save as, then shift right click, combine the entire thing. And by the way, as soon as you do the combine, you lose your instancing. That's why I'm telling you to do a save as. So do a save as, then combine it, then export to Unity. Export to Unity, do your web build. You should all know how to do that by now. But do your export to Unity, do your web build, make it a first-person player camera. You should be familiar with that by now, since I've been making you do it all semester. But anyways, but again, I also need, I'm gonna undo back. I also need this Maya file broken out into its pieces, and you need it too, because you need it to do your UV mapping. So to make your life easier for that. So save as, then combine it, then export to Unity, do your web build. Now I would suggest, yeah, you could do the vases and flowers, basically adding more stuff. If you model more stuff and show me that you've learned the modeling tools by modeling other stuff, that is the best way to get more than a C. And like I said, I've had people do elaborate throne rooms for this. I'm just saying the bar is set pretty high. I've had really elaborate throne rooms with like chandeliers and tapestries and like a days or dies or however you pronounce it, and then like all kinds of props. You know what I'm saying? I've had people do like suits of armor like standing around, and I've had people do some pretty elaborate scenes just for this Hearthstone project, which is cool, and I encourage you to do that. The more practice you get, the better you will get at this, and you will be more likely to survive your midterm. So I'm just saying, put some time in, make this awesome, make it awesome, make it pretty, and then make more stuff around it. Again, like I said, the best way to get better than a C is to add more stuff around it. The first thing I would encourage you to do is create like a structure. Create some sort of structure around it. Put it inside of a building. If it's just the heart throne sitting there on an empty plane with nothing but the empty horizon, that's, yeah, you'll get a C, but I mean, put some walls up. Put a structure together. I had somebody just yesterday that put together like a castle. They put together like a castle, and then like there was like, it wasn't a very thoroughly decorated castle but he put together a whole, like there were stairs to different levels of the castle. It was kind of funny because he actually put this castle together. I had to run through the castle to find the heart throne, because you had to like, it was almost like a maze. I had to like solve the maze to find the heart throne, which is kind of annoying but also kind of funny. So I was like, I gave him a few bonus points for that. I'm just saying. So do something fun with it. Don't just make it. If you just make this, it's a C. Just be aware. If you do it right, it's a C. So I'm just saying. Okay, so that's it. That's the heart throne. Again, the new tools that are different from the last video are shift right click. Oops, I have to have it selected. Oh, you have to have something selected for that, by the way. Make sure something is selected, otherwise you won't get this menu. Multi-cut tool here. Again, the multi-cut tool basically replaces the insert edge loop tool and the split polygon tool and the slice tool. Now those tools I think are still in here somewhere. Like insert edge loop is still here. It's just not quite in the same place anymore. But so anyways, it's still there, but it's like you don't even need it. You don't need that tool because it's like literally just holding the control key on this tool. And by the way, you can hold I'll show you a few more tricks real quick, just for fun. If you hold the control key, you can also hold the control and shift key. If you hold the control and shift key, you notice it starts to snap to certain magnets. So you can snap to magnets that way. You can, let's see, if you're using it as the split polygon tool, you can also just hold the shift key. So you can hold the shift key and it snaps to, you notice it said 50% there. So you can do snapping with the shift key in the split polygon tool that way. You can also do right angle cuts, which is really crazy. So if you click on an edge, if you hold the control and shift key, you can actually do it can do right angle cuts. So notice it's showing the little preview of a right angle. So if you want to make sure that you're doing a cut that is a right angle to the point you already put down, I mean, there's some really fancy tricks to this tool, and I'm very excited about it. So just want you to know that. Oh, one last trick. Come to think of it, let's say we want to straighten out an edge loop. Watch this. Right click, edge mode. If I want to straighten out an edge loop to flatten it, I can, first of all, one trick, double click an edge, gives you an edge loop. Edge loops are awesome. It's one of the best reasons to model with quads. If you double click an edge loop, gives you the whole, or double click an edge, it gives you the whole edge loop. I can now switch to the scale tool and click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and just keep clicking and dragging towards the middle until it stops moving. When it stops moving, now you know that this edge loop is now planar. It's now flat. So if you need to straighten something out, if you want to straighten something out, you can just double click an edge, go to the scale tool, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. Now, do you have to straighten out any of these edges right here? Nah, not really. You don't have to. It kind of makes the model look a little cleaner. If somebody's looking at the wireframe, it kind of looks a little cleaner when most of the edges are somewhat straight. For something a little bit more rounded like this, maybe not. Maybe you don't want it like that. But like, let's say, let me just get rid of that one. Like, let's say for here, like this doesn't need to like kind of bend down like that. Maybe you want this to be straight. So double click the edge and then straighten it out. Then you just don't forget to adjust it to keep the silhouette nice. Double click this. I can just, flatten this one out and then nudge it back up. And there you go. So it's like, you can definitely start to, straighten things out. Just, it just kind of makes the wireframe look a little cleaner. Like it's like, oh, look, you've been very careful with your edges. So I don't know, just something to know. And also sometimes you need that tool, by the way. In this case, I don't know, maybe you want to do it, maybe you don't. You can also use that on faces if you want to straighten, flatten a face out for some reason, which I don't, but just for demonstration purposes, you can flatten faces out. Using the scale tool is very, very useful for things you wouldn't necessarily assume you could do with it. Like for instance, if you have, just isolate select on this. If you have a face here and a face here, but you want them to move equidistantly apart, you could just grab both faces on either side and scale them out. That will move them equidistantly away from each other. So there's a lot of little tricks you can use the scale tool for that are very handy. So just good to get you thinking in terms of critical thinking skills. Cool. All right. So have fun and make awesome stuff. And again, make sure this is exactly like mine so that we can demonstrate the UVs. Because if you bring a model to class that is messy and full of n-gons or full of all kinds of problems, you're going to try to keep up during my UV lecture, and you're going to be like, oh, I can't do this. Oh, it's my model's freaking out. And we don't have time, unfortunately. We don't have time to fix your model and teach you UVs all in the same class because they only give me 3 hours with you. So So make sure your model is good and clean. Otherwise, it's going to cause a problem when you try to learn how to UV map. Okay? See you in class.